If you were to ask a bunch of players who they believe to be the most important role in the game, the majority will likely return jungle. Jungle is a curious role, unconventional by the standards of lane roles in that it doesn't have a lane to begin with, rather a series of paths connecting the 3 lanes together to form Summoner's Rift. While the goal of a laner is to stay in their lane and farm minions, the goal of a jungler is a lot more open-ended, presenting a range of courses of action the jungler can take to influence the map. Once considered a role too impractical, it wasn't even formally acknowledged by the game way back in the day. But fast forward to the present day, the jungle has not only become legitimized as one of the 5 roles, but through systematic changes and continuous updates, many regard it as the sole reason a team wins or loses a game. And at a surface glance, it's not completely unreasonable to see how that would be the case. One such aspect that can be targeted would be the existence of Smite, a summoner spell generally taken by exclusively junglers to allow them to perform their task of clearing camps and neutral objectives at a secure rate. That's what we'll be going over for today. I want to discuss the problem with Smite and how it might be one of the root factors behind jungle having the controversial dominance it does. By the way, I hope everyone's been doing well in Season 15 so far with all the first blood cheesing that's been going around. All the more reason why jungler is the most overpowered role in the game, right? Well, why not secure a strong jungle duo partner through our sponsor for today? TapinGG is back once again. TapinGG is a one-stop shop where you can find the perfect duo partner for you, whether you want to have a skillful player to up your odds in solo queue, a group of players you want to squad up with in flex, someone to vibe with an ARAM and arena partner, or see if you have the wrist to make up for being pissed slow by duoing with the gamer girl. On a more serious note, as stated earlier, the season has reset once again, and like with any season, the primary concern on everyone's mind is how they start, because I speak from experience when I say that how you start can make all the difference between being hard stuck and MMR screwed, or winners queuing your way to whatever elo you're aiming for in a matter of a dozen games at most. It's for that reason I recommend Tapin to start out by ensuring that at least one of your 4 teammates have more than 2 brain cells. Feel free to use my link on screen or in the description below and let me know how your climb is going so far. Thanks again to Tapin for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's get back on topic. Unlike other summoner spells which either focus on tempo like Flash, Ghost, and Teleport, or combat like Ignite, Heal, and Barrier, Smite is taken for an altogether different purpose, being potentially the 2nd or 3rd most frequently taken summoner spell on account of every jungler being obligated to do so. At its base form, Smite's meant to primarily be used on minions or jungle camps, dealing a huge amount of true damage almost immediately upon cast. It's been like that ever since it came out back in 2009, having gone through multiple iterations between then and now. Seeing as a jungler spends most of their time throughout the jungle, they would obviously take it for faster clear times. To further that incentive, early renditions of Smite offered special buffs to the user depending on who they smited. Longtime players might recall stuff like smiting Krugs, giving you a brawn passive stun on minions and monsters, or a chunk of true damage to towers. Smiting the red buff would heal you, and smiting the blue buff would give you mana, so on and so forth. As a result of going to and from lane to lane through the jungle, junglers would also be tasked with securing neutral objectives like Dragon and Baron. What enables them to do so is of course the sheer amount of burst damage they can do up front through Smite. Typically, Smite's balanced around dealing measurably more damage in a concentrated blow than most champions are capable of doing through normal means, especially considering that few true damage attacks can actually be used on monsters. Just imagine if Garen could use Demacian Justice on Baron, that would be funny as hell. This property effectively made the jungler obligatory when taking neutral objectives, as they would not only be likely around the area anyway, but they're also the most assured way to capture said neutral objective because of Smite, a notion that's only gotten more prevalent as they added more neutral objectives like Rift Herald, Void Grubs, and the new Otacon boss that's scheduled to come out in version 15. Later down the road, Smite was overhauled to receive additional upgrades, enabling it to either be used more for the jungle through scavenging and blasting Smite, or even turning it into a combat summoner through challenging and chilling Smite. The former reducing the target's damage dealt to you while also burning them for true damage over a few seconds upon getting struck by attacks or abilities, and the latter slowing the target and increasing your move speed by the same amount. During this time, the aforementioned Rift Herald objective was added, and the dragons got reworked a few times to bring us the system we have today, elemental drakes condensing into a soul and then eventually the Elder Dragon. To push it even further, Smite was made absolutely mandatory for the sake of purchasing jungle items that can only be bought by champions who take Smite. Like the actual Smite itself, they've gone through a number of iterations, the current version taking the form of a tiny pet that follows you around while clearing. At one point, junglers had access to their own exclusive items, beginning with the Spirit items, Spectral Wraith, Elder Lizard, and Ancient Golem, before turning into the various upgrade enchantments like Warrior, Bloodrazor, Runic Echoes, and Cinderhulk. Then, upon the release of mythic items, Smite enabled you to purchase the Ember Knife or Hailblade, which automatically converted into challenging and chilling Smite respectively after being cast 5 times. Following the removal of mythic items, they were then replaced by the 3 pet items, giving us the Unleashed and Primal Smites we have today, which may arguably be the strongest iteration of Smite we have so far, subsequently cementing the jungle as arguably the strongest role in the game. Compared to the basic Smites we had back then, the buffs you get now are completely staggering. By default, Unleashed Smite comes with a 20% slow, making it usable as a combat summoner very early on. Then when it became Primal Smite, Gustwalker passively grants 30% bonus move speed when walking through a brush, and just shortly after it, increased to 45 upon killing a large monster. Moss Stopper grants a permanent shield that stays in effect until broken, refreshing after being out of combat or killing a monster camp. Finally, Scorched Claw. After stacking it up, your next basic attack or ability damage deals 1% max health true damage over time and slows them for more than the base Smite. I think it's safe to say this version of the Smite system is the strongest it's ever been, especially when you take into account that it went from a 1k damage cap against minions and monsters to 1.2k. Assuming it's upgraded at a reasonable time, the jungler is guaranteed to secure objectives against 99% of champion abilities, including burst ultimates like Lux, Orianna, and whatnot. The only way Smite can be contested is with another Smite, leading us to the first problem with the Summoner spell. Smite's gotten to a point where it's practically uncontestable. Factoring in the high defense parameters of neutral mobs, champions would need to be unrealistically fed to deal enough damage in a single blow to burst over Smite. That's the whole point of the Summoner spell, to make it so junglers can reliably secure objectives. As you can surmise, the only way to stop the enemy jungler from taking an objective is with your own jungler. Granted, you can kill the enemy jungler if they're trying to solo it and you catch them without any help, but assuming both teams are contesting the objective, the jungler is the single most important player on both teams in that situation. This puts an incredible amount of pressure on the jungler to pull it off, since failing to do so results in consequences that permanently affect the course of the game thereafter, and over the years they've added more and more consequences to this. Neutral objectives used to be semi-important parts of the Rift that teams would fight for just to have something to strategize towards. It was entirely possible and realistic to beat the enemy team with a 4-0 dragon advantage over you, since two of the stacks were not even conducive to combat. One buff was bonus damage to minions and monsters, the other buff was to towers. Prior to 4.20, killing the dragon only gave you extra gold. So while it was a meaningful objective, it was something you could easily work around. Same applied to Baron as well. Back in the day, it would give the team bonus health and mana regeneration, attack damage, and ability power. It didn't even come with the range of buffs provided to minions to make sieging easier. Nowadays, it comes with the offensive stats, bonus to minions, and the empowered recall, granting a huge macro advantage over the enemy team. As for the dragons, they've since been upgraded to all be combat stat oriented, and collecting 4 dragons affords your team the dragon soul of that game, substantially increasing the combat pressure of whichever team that has it to where your chances of winning skyrocket above 85%. Taking it one step further, the Elder Dragon buff is effectively an instant win button if the enemy team doesn't make a break for it immediately upon failing. Let's not forget Void Grubs, which to be fair isn't really that Smite dependent but still worth mentioning, and Rift Herald, which can easily take out 2 or 3 towers if used correctly, opening up the map for your team to subsequently obtain more objectives. The outcome of an entire game can literally be decided on a few smites, and it's become such a vital component of the jungler that over time the role itself has become more essential for doing just about anything in the game. The fact that scoring a kill on the enemy jungler in the mid to late game is an instant green light for your team to bum rush Baron brings to focus how everything basically boils down to where the jungler is or if they're alive to begin with. You can be in prime position to do dragon, but if your jungler is halfway across the map, even if you got 4 dudes in the pit and only 3 enemy champions out there, the odds are actually against you if one of the 3 members is the jungler. So much emphasis is placed on the jungler making a hero play stealing the dragon or Baron because of Smite. How this presents a problem is that Smite's balanced around only being usable by junglers. It's exceedingly rare for the other 4 roles to have an active Smite user. I believe the last time was probably Runeglaive Ezreal back in Season 5. There's probably at least one more instance between then and now, but I can't recall it off the top of my head. Even challenging Smite back when it gave 20% damage mitigation and a true damage burn on par with the red buff isn't as strong as a practical combat sum like Ignite. Top laners typically go a tempo summoner spell like Ghost or Teleport, with only a few taking Ignite just to get lane pressure. Mid laners alternate between Teleport, Ignite, sometimes Barrier. ADCs go Ghost, Healer, Barrier, and supports go Ignite, Exhaust, Barrier, or Heal. Given that Smite has no function in the early game, there's no point in taking it except for junglers. It would be one thing if Smite could be run by any role, but it's been designed in such a way that it offers no impact in lane, an intentional move at that. While the role of a jungler is open-ended, you can technically section it off into 2 fundamental ones, ganking and farming. Ganking junglers acquire advantage and priority by opening up a lane to then accompany them to find objectives. Farming junglers tend to be really fast at clearing objectives. If afforded 15 to 20 seconds and they have 2 smites, they can run through dragon or void grubs even without the help of their laner. Smite's what allows a jungler, regardless of which role they want to take, to have a fair shot at clearing objectives. In addition, Smite serves to equalize the jungle. Understandably, there's no chance in hell a jungle Maokai or Sejuani is going to be able to outsecure a Kha'Zix, I don't care who you are. But through Smite, even the lowest DPS jungler like Ivern or heck, Jungle Yuumi still has a shot at securing Baron. It's what allows tanks or less carry focused junglers to still be able to perform their duties at a basic level. The existence of Smite gives junglers a clearly defined purpose. killing camps and ganking lanes aren't enough to define a champion's role. A mid laner can roam top and bot, a top laner can go mid, or a support can roam around the map. Likewise, top and bot lane might go after Krugs or Grump, mid lane might go after Raptors. The one thing that distinguishes a jungler from the rest of their team is Smite. If a laner were allowed to take Smite and apply it practically, there would be functionally no difference between a laner and the jungler. The point of Smite being balanced around the jungler was to give that role agency, due to it having once been dismissed as a second support role. Smite is also equally necessary for keeping junglers in check. Despite Smite having practical combat applications in the modern day, it's still a summoner spell mostly used for farming and objectives, and pales in comparison to a combat or tempo summoner. If hypothetically, a jungler were allowed to run Flash and Ignite or Flash Teleport, or any secondary summoner, they would instantly become the strongest champions in the game, since the modern jungle gives you infinite HP and mana even without red and blue buff in light of how much you heal through your jungle item, and you have free access to the entire map, not having to pay an opportunity cost to leave your lane and roam. While nowhere near as behind in gold access compared to where they were back then, not being allowed to take 2 normal summoner spells is one way to balance the jungle role, which is funny to hear when you think of how strong they've become over time. Smite presents an issue in that conceptually it is game warping impact in a match and can only be practically taken by one champion on both teams, placing a huge onus on those players to meet expectations because no one else can do it for them. It's why jungle is the most understaffed role in the game. The pressure to secure objectives effectively makes it so you can't just sit back and get carried as a jungler. There have been far too many games where all 3 lanes are winning but you still lose the game because the enemy jungler just diffs you so hard by scoring Dragon, Baron, and whatnot. It's also the most difficult role to play weak side in. For top, mid, and bot lane, you can make efforts to diminish the amount of advantage your enemy laner gets by not feeding any more kills and trying to keep up in CS. But in the jungle, if you fall behind, you can hemorrhage gold, experience, and pressure very quickly. Without question, it's the least beginner-friendly and beginner-tolerant role in the game, and it's all because of Smite. At the same time, if they made it so anyone can take Smite, not just a jungler, it deprives agency from the jungle role and lowers its carry potential. In a situation like that, a game will be decided based on whichever team runs more Smites. So, what's the solution here? Players throughout the League community have frequently raised the question of why not just remove Smite altogether, make it so no one has it. That's a tough solution to implement for multiple reasons. Firstly, the game has been balanced around Smite. If they were to take it away, they would have to completely change up the mechanics of Summoner's Rift. Secondly, again, one of the selling points of Smite is that so many junglers would be worthless without it. Junglers that lack a burst attack or burst combo are at a huge disadvantage when it comes to securing objectives. Champions like Echo, Nunu, Cho'Gath, Kha'Zix, Rengar, Kindred, and so on topple over the competition, while most tanks are AoE-centric junglers like Rammus, Lilia, Amumu, and Zac who excel in big AoE damage but not single target will struggle to do anything. You can make a case that objective control matters a lot more now that the option to jump in and steal it doesn't exist, but it would still be too difficult for non-burst champs to comfortably clear, placing even more reliance on the team helping them out, which evidently isn't something junglers want to have to do. And on that note, thirdly, without Smite, ganking is the only way you can do your job as a jungler, and ganks can be very hit or miss depending on the enemy team or your team. The option to farm for a gold lead, while discouraged, not encounter your team complaining it's a 4v5, should still be allowed as an alternative win condition, especially if you get out-skirmished by the enemy jungler. Predator junglers can also take double combat sums and make your life a living hell. It would completely throw the jungle meta upside down, which I mean depending on who you ask might be a small price to pay for salvation, but there that is. If I were to offer my 2 cents, I definitely think Smite has reached a point where it's too important. When you factor in the buffs they made to Smite, the game having more neutral objectives than ever before, having added Void Grubs and now the new Otacon boss, and the overalls to Dragon over the years with the Dragon Soul and Elder Drake, while those implementations are fantastic for making the game more entertaining as a whole, a side effect was that the jungle role got way too essential for most games. And all of that ties back to Smite. How they should navigate it might require an entirely separate video, but I do think something has to be done about Smite. It might just be due to jungle diff, but what do you guys think? Do you agree that Smite needs to be addressed, or do you think it's something else about the jungle role that makes it the main character role everyone thinks it to be? Feel free to share in the comments down below. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at VarsFarum, join my Discord server, and check out my other discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.